my reactor. So we back with chapter 5 of the fall. The road was further away than I expected. As it got darker, the sun was setting, not rising. I tore pages from my scrap pad and stuck them on trees now and then to mark my trail. Even then, I worried that I might not be able to find my way back to Rufus. When I reached the road, I pulled up some bushes and made a kind of barricade speckled with bits of white paper. That would stop me at the right place when I came back, if no one moved it meanwhile. I followed the road until it was dark, followed it through the woods, through the fields, past a large house much finer than a Wayland's. No one bothered me. I hid behind a tree once when two white men rode past. They might not have paid me any attention, but I didn't want to take the chance. And then there was three black women walking with large bundles of balance on their heads. Evening, they said as I passed them. I nodded and wished them a good evening, and I walked faster, wondering suddenly that the years had done to Luke and Sarah, to Nigel and Curry. The children who had played at selling each other might already be working in the fields now, and what would time had done to Margaret Wayland. I doubted that it had made her any easier to live with. Finally, after more woods and fields, the plain square house was before me, its downstairs windows full of yellow lights. I was startled to catch myself saying wearily, "Home at last." I stood still for a moment between the fields and the house and reminded myself that I was in a hostile place. It didn't look alien any longer, but that only made it more dangerous, made me more likely to relax and make a mistake. I rubbed my back, touched the several long scars to remind myself that I could not afford to make mistakes. As the scars forced me to remember that I had been away from this place for only a few days. Not that I had forgotten exactly, but it was as though during my walk I had been getting used to the idea that years has passed for these people since I had last seen them. I had begun to feel, not think, that a great deal of time had passed for me too. It was a vague feeling, but it seemed right and comfortable. More comfortable than trying to keep in mind what was really happening. Some parts of me had apparently given up on time-distorted reality and smoothed things out. Well, that was all right, as long as it didn't go too far. I continued on towards the house, mentally prepared now, I hope, to meet Tom Whalen. But as I approached, a tall, thin shadow of a white man came towards me from the direction of the quarter. "Hey there," he called. "What are you doing out here?" His long step closed the distance. His long steps closed the distance between us quickly, and in a moment, he stood peering down at me. "You don't belong here," he said. "Who's your master?" I come to get help from Mr. Rufus," I said, and then, feeling suddenly doubtful because he was a stranger, I asked, "This is still where he lives, isn't it?" The man did not answer. He continued to peer at me. I wondered whether it was my sex or my accent that he was trying to figure out, or maybe it was the fact that I hadn't called him sir or master. I had to begin that degrading nonsense again. But who was this man anyway? "He lives here," I answered finally. "What's wrong with him?" "Some men beat him. He can't walk." "Is he drunk?" No, sir. Not quite." "Worthless bastard." I jumped a little. The man had spoken softly, but there was no mistaking what he had said. I said nothing. "Come on," he ordered, and led me into the house. He left me standing in the entrance hall and went to the library where I suppose Wayland was. I looked at the wooden bench a few steps from me, the settee. But although I was tired, I didn't sit down. Margaret Whalen had once caught me sitting there tying my shoe. She had screamed and ragged as though she caught me stealing her jewelry. I didn't want to renew my acquaintance with her in another scene like that. I didn't want to renew my acquaintance with her at all, but it seems inventable. There was a sound behind me, and I turned in a quick apprehension. A young slave woman stood staring at me. She was light-skinned, blue kerchief, and very pregnant. "Curry?" I asked. She ran to me, caught me by my shoulders for a moment, and looked into my face, and then she hugged me. The white stranger chose that moment to come out of the library with Tom Whalen. "What's going on here?" demanded the stranger. Curry moved away from me quickly, head down, and I said, "We're old friends, sir." Tom Whalen, grayer, thinner, grimmier looking than ever, came over to me. He stared at me for a moment, then turned to face the stranger. "When did you say his horse came in, Jake?" "About an hour ago." "That long? You should have told me." "He's taken that longer and longer before." Whalen signed, glanced at me. "Yes, but I think it might be more serious this time, Curry." "Curry!" The mute woman had been walking away towards the back door. Now she turned to look at Whalen. "Have Nigel bring the wagon around front." She gave the half nod, half curtsy that she reserved for whites and hurried away. Something occurred to me as she was going, and I spoke to Whalen. "I think Mr. Rufus might have broken ribs. He wasn't coughing blood, so his lungs are probably all right. But it might be a good idea for me to bandage him a little before you move him." I had never bandaged anything worse than a cut finger in my life, but I did remember a little of the first aid I had learned in school. I hadn't thought to act when Rufus broke his leg, but I might be able to help now. "You can bandage him when we get there," said Whalen. And to the stranger, "Jake, you send somebody for the doctor." Jake took a last disapproving look at me and went out the back door after Curry. Whalen went out the front door without another word to me, and I followed, trying to remember how important it was to bandage broken ribs. That is, whether it was worth talking back to Whalen about. I didn't want Rufus badly injured, even though he deserved to be. Any injury could be dangerous, but from what I could remember, bandaging the ribs was done mostly to relieve the pain. I wasn't sure whether I remembered that because it was true or because I wanted to avoid any kind of confrontation with Whalen. I didn't have to touch the scab on my back to be conscious of him. A tall, stocky slave drove a wagon around to us, and I got on the back while Whalen took the seat beside the driver. The driver glanced back at me and said softly, "How are you, Dana?" "Nigel, it's me," he said, grinning. "Grown some since you seen me last, I guess." He had grown into another loop, a big, handsome man bearing little resemblance to the boy I remember. "You keep your mouth shut and watch the road," said Whalen. Then to me, "You got to tell us where to go." It would have been a pleasure to tell him where to go, but I spoke civilly. "It's a long way from here," I said. "I had to pass someone else's house and fields on my way to you. The judge's place. You could have got help there." I didn't know and wouldn't have tried if I'd known. I wondered, though, whether this was the Judge Homer who would soon be sending men out to chase Isaac. It seemed likely. "Did you leave Rufus by the side of the road?" Whalen asked. "No, sir, he's in the woods." "You sure you know we're in the woods?" "Yes, sir." "You better." He said nothing else. I found Rufus with no particular difficulty, and Nigel lifted him as gently and as easily as Luke once did. On the wagon, he held his side, then he held my hand. "Once," he said, "I'll keep my word." I nodded and touched his forehead in case he couldn't see me nodding. His forehead was hot and dry. "He'll keep his word about what?" asked Whalen. He was looking back at me, so I frowned and looked perplexed and said, "I think he has a fever as well as broken ribs, sir." Waylon made a sound of disgust. He was sick yesterday, puking all over. But he would get up and go out today, damn fool. And he felt silent again until we reached the house. Then, as Nigel carried Rufus aside and up the stairs, Waylon steered me into his forbidden library. He pushed me close to a well-oiled lamp, and there, in the bright yellow light, he stared at me silently, critically, until I looked towards the door. "You're the same one, all right," he said finally. I didn't want to believe it. I said nothing. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Who are you?" I hesitated, not knowing what to answer because I didn't know how much he knew. The truth might make him decide I was out of my mind, but I didn't want to be caught in a lie. "Well, I don't know what you want me to say," I told him. "I'm Dana. You know me." "Don't tell me what I know." I stood silent, confused, frightened. Kevin wasn't here now. There was no one for me to call if I needed help. "I'm someone who might have just saved your son's life," I said softly. "He might have died out there sick and injured and alone. And you think I ought to be grateful?" Why did he sound angry, and why shouldn't he be grateful? I can't tell you how you ought to feel, Mr. Whalen. That's right, you can't. There was a moment of silence that he seemed to expect me to feel. Eagerly, I changed the subject. "Mr. Whalen, do you know where Mr. Franklin went?" "Oddly, that seems to reach him." His expression softened a little. "Him," he said, "damn fool. Where did he go?" "Somewhere north, I don't know. Rufus had some letters from him. He gave me another long story. I guess you want to stay here." He sounded as though he was giving me a choice, which was surprising because he didn't have to. Maybe gratitude meant something to him, after all. "I'd like to stay for a while," I said. Better to try to reach Kevin from here than go wandering around some north of city trying to find him, especially since I had no money and since I was still so ignorant of this time. "You got to work for your keep," said Waylon, "like you did before." "Yes, sir." "That Franklin comes back here, stop here. He came back once hoping to find you, I think." "When?" "Last year sometime. You go up and stay with Rufus until the doctors come. Take care of him." "Yes, sir," I turned to go. "That seemed to be what you're for anyway," he muttered. I kept going, glad to get away from him. He had known more about me than he wanted to talk about. That was clear from the questions he hadn't asked. He had seen me vanish twice now, and Kevin and Rufus had probably told him at least something about me. I wonder how much, and I wonder what Kevin had done, or I wonder what Kevin had said or done that made him a damn fool. Whatever it was, I learned about it from Rufus. Waylon was too dangerous to question. Okay, y'all, that's it, and I'll be back with chapter 6 soon, tomorrow. Okay. Bye, my reactors.